Alright, so if you were with us this time last year, you know that I did make gifts, and that's what we're doing today. Is we've got my dad actually works with some folks that really like the Who Stole My Cheese book, and so we're making some keychains that are cheese slices or cheese chunks. So we headed over to Thingiverse, and I found this object by Korea Key or Korea Chi, and it really 3D printed awesome. We set here a bit of thermoset plastic down into the first cup so that it would automatically self-level, and that we would have a flat surface to then do on the cheese. But the thing that happened was this first round of covering the keychain actually floated up into the silicone rubber. So I ended up having to tape down a treasure chest, which I'll show you here in a second. So we ended up making two molds. We got one for a treasure chest and we got one for the cheese. Pushed the cheese down and it did stick the second time to the tape, and there it is with the thin layer of rubber. And so we'll just fill this back the rest of the way to get that second mold. And I was really worried that this wasn't going to come out, because when it floats like that, then the rubber gets under the object, but actually, because I taped it, that tape kept the rubber from getting to the flush side of the part that's supposed to remain open. So I'll show you here as I pull it out and get the plastic off and get that some of that extra rubber that wicks up the sides of the cup. So we've got another flat surface. Pull the hard plastic off that was our level, and now we've got this piece of cheese that we can pull out. It was a little tricky because the actual air holes that are in this kind of cheese meant that there were big chunks of plastic sticking into the mold, and so I had to be really careful when I stretched the mold. I was really happy I used this kind of rubber instead of the more rigid kind, because I could pull and bend the rubber away from the 3D object. So we've got our mold now. It's got the key ring built in. The key ring is flat level against the top. And so what I've done now to reinforce the key ring part is I have twisted a piece of jewelry wire around a paintbrush, make a little loop, slide that loop over the mold loop so that the jewelry wire now will run throughout, crisscross and bend inside the liquid plastic, holding it and holding its shape is always the hope and always the thought. And then I actually pulled out, I haven't used, I don't think, with the channel at all. I have some dye for plastic, and so I got out the orange dye to make the cheese orange. This is my favorite part here of mold casting, is watching the thermoset plastic. Just, it gets solid and turns light, and you can see it in real time. It's really a neat science bit there. And then I clipped the excess around the ring really carefully, and I did have one that I had to redo because the wire was sticking out of the plastic and accidentally got clipped with the excess plastic. So if you cut through the wire, especially if you cut through it twice and cut a chunk out, the whole loop is going to lose integrity, and which it did. So that one is going to just be a piece of cheese with no loop, and that's okay. So I ended up doing this a few times. Each time I was trying to figure out the best mix of how much dye for the amount of plastic. So I ended up with a kind of a rainbow of oranges, varying from almost white to kind of neon orange. But it worked out okay, and the loops turned out awesome with that jewelry wire, pouring the plastic over the jewelry wire. I was really happy with how those turned out. So the next steps is I'm gonna get some of some keychain hardware, and then we'll just put them on there, and that'll be it. So these kinds of projects, now this, we have the mold forever, so if there's a need for cheese, we can fill it. But actually, with the classes that I'm taking for graphic arts, we're learning about how to write up, estimates and cost analysis and things like that for creating the mold, the time, and I'm actually able to do sort of a workup, even though this is a gift, for doing more accurate predictions when people want us to have commissioned or specifically custom things made. We can have a detailed list of how that's going to be laid out. So that's exciting. I'm happy for that too, as sort of a side effect of the learning part of the process, that you're going to have some amount of damage and some amount of waste generated that has to be built in. And then I actually, perfectly down to the last drop, used up the end of my orange dye. So the next thing will either have to be a different color, or I'll have to pick up some more. But here they are after the mold casting. I think they just turned out awesome. So if you like the video, if you like what we're doing here, go ahead and like and subscribe. And otherwise, you can also always support us on Patreon, and we appreciate that very much as well. So hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the year and a start into the new year. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks, Internet.